Hey there. Tonight, we're journeying far back, not to marble palaces or thunderbolts streaking across the sky, but to the ancient myths whispered beneath open stars. This is the tale of labors, legends, and the winding saga of a man who was undeniably strong, yet profoundly lost, flawed, and achingly human. This isn't a story of glory shouted from mountaintops. It's one of burdens shouldered, of relentless effort, of quiet endurance, the kind of heroism found in simply carrying on. If tales like these bring you solace, feel free to like or subscribe, but only if they offer you peace. Drop a comment about where you're listening from in the hour. There's something oddly comforting in tracing the quiet reach of these ancient whispers. So dim the lights, settle in, let your thoughts slow, and let's begin where all myths start, at the dawn of a story that still echoes today. We'll start gently with a tale as old as twilight, woven into the fabric of myth, embroidered with threads of ancient superstition, and dusted with the fingerprints of mortal confusion. This is the story of Hercules, or Hercules, if you prefer the Roman flair. But let's not rush. After all, you're likely listening in bed, and no one storms Olympus with a yawn. Our story begins not in the heavens, but on earth, in the city of Thebes, though even that name carries the hazy vagueness of myth. There lived a mortal woman named Alcmene, noble in blood and patient in temperament, crucially married. Her husband, Amphitryon, was off at war, which in Greek mythology was like leaving your windows open during a thunderstorm. Sooner or later, something unexpected would slip in. Enter Zeus, or rather, descend Zeus, king of the gods, wielder of storms, with a beard as flowing as his fidelity was fleeting. Zeus took a liking to Alcmene, not because she sought divine company, but precisely because she didn't. And in Greek myth, that was practically an invitation. Disguising himself as Amphitryon, Zeus returned from war early and spent the night with Alcmene, stretching it into 3 nights by bending time, a move excessive even by divine standards. Unaware, Alcmene believed it was her husband. Thus, the seed of a demigod was sown. The next morning, the real Amphitryon arrived. Alcmene, understandably confused, congratulated him on their romantic reunion, one he hadn't yet experienced. When the truth unraveled, it left a trail of anger, particularly from Hera. Hera, queen of Olympus, wife of Zeus, sharp-eyed and perpetually furious, though rarely at the right target. Her wrath often fell on the women Zeus pursued and the children born from these celestial indiscretions. This time, it landed squarely on the unborn Heracles. Let's pause for context. The Greeks saw their gods not as omnipotent beings, but as flawed entities, petty, jealous, and terrible at conflict resolution. They were a divine soap opera, and Hera played her role with unmatched dramatic flair. Learning of Alcmene's pregnancy, she didn't just fume, she acted. She convinced her daughter Eileithyia, goddess of childbirth, to halt Alcmene's labor indefinitely. The poor woman was trapped in endless contractions, a cruel magical stalemate. But Alcmene's servant Galanthus tricked Eileithyia by shouting that the baby had been born. Startled, the goddess loosened her spell, and Heracles entered the world, already extraordinary. As an infant, he was enormous, with the strength of many men and the appetite of an army, a chaotic combination in any nursery. Hera, undeterred, sent 2 serpents to his cradle, hoping for a silent assassination. Instead, the infant grabbed a snake in each hand and strangled them. When his nurse returned, she found him gurgling contentedly, the serpents limp as discarded toys. This tale, one of the earliest in the Heracles cycle, appears in vase paintings and classical literature. An amphora from 520 BC shows Heracles gripping the snakes effortlessly while onlookers gape. Scholars suggest the story served dual purposes, entertaining the masses and illustrating divine strength from birth. It also set the tone for his life, a constant negotiation between divine favor and divine punishment. Heracles wasn't an only child. Alcmene bore another son, Iphicles, fathered by Amphitryon. The twins grew up together, one divine, One mortal, awkward family dinners guaranteed. Iphicles, though brave, lived in his brother's shadow, a metaphor the Greeks loved for exploring fate, lineage, and the blurred lines between man and god. As a youth, Heracles was tutored by Greece's finest minds. The centaur Chiron taught him medicine and music. Linus, a stern music master, tried teaching him the lyre, a staple of noble education. But Heracles had little patience for scales or correction. When Linus struck him for a mistake, Heracles struck back with the lyre, tragically killing him. Exiled for manslaughter, Heracles grew in strength and stature, hunting lions, wrestling centaurs, and performing feats that would shame any modern gym routine. One early exploit involved defeating a lion ravaging the plains of Scythia. He wore its pelt afterward, a signature look later confused with the Nemean lion. Heracles was also known for his appetite, not just for food, but for life. He drank deeply from experience, often alarming bystanders. One anecdote claims he single-handedly devoured an entire banquet before guests arrived. Whether true or not, it cemented his larger-than-life image. Yet his temper was legendary and dangerous. This flaw would haunt him. In early adulthood, Hera struck again, not with serpents but madness. Under her influence, Heracles lost touch with reality, slaughtering his wife Megara and their children. The grief that followed was all-consuming. Seeking penance, he turned to the Oracle of Delphi, who instructed him to serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns and complete a series of labors, tasks so impossible they'd cleanse his sins and earn him immortality. But that's a tale for another chapter. Historically, Heracles wasn't invented whole cloth. He may have originated as a Mycenaean hero, his name etched in linear B tablets from the Bronze Age. Over centuries, his legend shifted, adapting to each generation's needs. In the 5th century BCE, Athenian playwrights reimagined Heracles as a tragic figure, a man whose divine strength couldn't shield him from mortal suffering. The Romans later reshaped him into a symbol of imperial might, but his roots ran deeper than empires. He wasn't just a character in tavern tales or epic poems. He was worshipped in sanctuaries, honored in festivals, and invoked by athletes competing in games bearing his name. Even the Olympics, though officially dedicated to Zeus, whispered tributes to Heracles as their mythic founder. His influence bled beyond Greece. Etruscan art frequently depicted him under the name Hercule, bridging Mediterranean mythologies. He became the archetype of the suffering strongman, a theme that resonated across centuries. The Stoics of Rome, like Seneca, saw him not as a brute, but as a moral compass, a being who transformed agony into virtue. So we close this chapter where it began, in a cradle with a serpent-strangling babe who'd never know peace. Born of gods but raised by mortals, Heracles entered life as a paradox wrapped in muscle and prophecy. He'd battle monsters, descend into the underworld, and eventually burn upon a funeral pyre, but not yet. For now, he sleeps. And so should you. Let's resume not with glory, but with grief. Before becoming the world's most famously overworked hero, Heracles first had to fall, hard, publicly, tragically. This chapter begins with madness. Not the rustling leaves kind, nor the storm on the horizon variety, but the insidious whisper of a goddess nursing a grudge. When we last left Heracles, he'd grown into a mountain of a man, mythic in stature, unmatched in strength, with a beard that did most of the talking at parties. He'd married Megara, a Theban princess, and seemed to settle into domestic bliss. This, of course, was unacceptable to Hera. The queen of Olympus, still fuming over her husband's demigod litter, bided her time. Hera never forgot. More importantly, she never forgave. Her next strike came not with serpents or spells, but with madness, the cruelest divine weapon. One moment, Heracles was at peace. The next, the world twisted into a nightmare. In his frenzy, he mistook his family for enemies. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. When the fog lifted, the palace stood silent. His wife and children lay slain. The horror shattered him. The strongest man in Greece fell not to war, but to his own home. not by spear, but by a goddess's hissed curse. The Greeks called this ruinous madness sent by the gods. Even heroes weren't immune to collapse. This wasn't just tragedy, it was cosmic balance. The Greeks believed in miasma, the soul's pollution after such acts. No feast or apology could cleanse Heracles. He needed purification, and for Greek heroes, that meant suffering. Barefoot and broken, he traveled to Delphi, where Apollo's oracle sat, shrouded in smoke. Heracles begged for guidance. The answer? Servitude. Specifically, 12 years under King Eurystheus of Tiryns, a petty, cowardly cousin who'd inherited Mycenae's throne thanks to Hera's meddling. Serving him wasn't just penance, it was humiliation. But Greek catharsis demanded humility. The 12 labors were born, a bureaucratic punishment with poetic flair. Redemption via impossible errands. Before listing these feats, let's linger on the fall. This moment reveals Heracles isn't just a brute. He's a man who erred deeply, faced consequences, and had to earn redemption through ordeal. Megara, often overshadowed, met varying fates. Exiled in some versions, slain in others. Greek mythology, ever elastic, wove multiple threads. Euripides' tragedy Heracles immortalized this crime. In it, the hero saves his family from a tyrant, only for Hera to madden him into killing those he just rescued. Awakening to his deeds, he contemplates suicide until Theseus convinces him to endure. Endurance, that's the key. Greek heroes weren't saints. They were mirrors of human struggle. Courage wasn't the absence of failure, but the will to rise after falling. Hera's villainy? Context matters. In a world where gods assaulted mortals without consequence, her fury was divine protest. Misplaced, but understandable. Visual echoes abound. A 5th century BCE red figure crater shows Heracles mid-frenzy, face twisted, weapons flailing, a snapshot of divine storm-made flesh. His madness parallels other myths, like Ajax slaughtering livestock in delusion. But where Ajax took his life, Heracles chose the harder path, to live. After Delphi, he submitted. For 12 years, his life wouldn't be defined by lineage or ambition, but by obedience to a king who couldn't lift his lion pelt. The irony wasn't lost on Greeks. Heracles wasn't sent to war. He was given a checklist. Slay, fetch, clean, capture. Each task designed to break him. But we're getting ahead. Modern storytelling still follows this blueprint, the fallen hero's journey. Arthurian knights, Shakespearean kings, comic book antiheroes, all trace their arcs to Heracles. Even early Christian redemption arcs echo his salvation earned through suffering. His later worship emphasized this. At shrines in Thebes and Thassos, votives included miniature clubs and lion skins, symbols of trials overcome. Pilgrims prayed not for ease, but for strength to endure like he had. Seneca's Stoics revered him as suffering nobly, virtue triumphing over divine spite. So if your eyelids grow heavy, let's leave Heracles here. Past in ruins, path unclear, sandals dusty. The labors await. So does sleep. The 12 labors of Heracles, epic in scope, absurdly specific in detail, were less a test of strength than a divine scavenger hunt laced with traps. Each task Eurystheus assigned carried its own humiliation, its own lethal sting, all designed to break the hero. But we begin with the setup itself. Heracles ordered to serve not as honored guest, but as indentured muscle to a king who couldn't wrestle his way out of a linen tunic. First labor, the Nemean lion. Not your average big cat. Its golden hide was arrow-proof, sword-proof, spear-proof. Villagers had resigned themselves to being occasional snacks. Heracles entered its cave armed only with a club and cunning. When weapons failed, he did what he did best, grappled it barehanded, strangling the beast, then used its own claws to skin it. The pelt became his signature armor, a sartorial flex both practical and terrifying. That lion head hood draped over his shoulders would echo through centuries of art, from Corinthian vases to Renaissance frescoes. Next came the Lernaean hydra, a swamp-dwelling serpent with regenerative heads, 9, 12, Depends who's telling. Chop one off, two sprouted in its place. Heracles brought backup, his nephew Iolaus, who cauterized neck stumps with torches while his uncle hacked. Teamwork made the nightmare work. Hera, watching from Olympus like a spiteful sports fan, sent a giant crab to pinch Heracles mid-battle. He crushed it underfoot. Later, both monsters got constellation status, Greek myth's version of participation trophies. Labor 3 swapped gore for grind, capturing the Ceryneian hind. This golden-horned deer, sacred to Artemis, was faster than gossip. The catch? No harming it. So Heracles did the unthinkable. He chased it for an entire year. Through forests, over mountains, across rivers, like some Bronze Age marathon. When he finally cornered it, he negotiated with Artemis herself, promising safe return. A rare moment of diplomacy in a blood-soaked resume. Then, the Erymanthian boar, a tusked bulldozer terrorizing farmlands. Heracles outsmarted it by driving the beast into deep snow, then delivering it alive to Eurystheus, who promptly hid in a giant storage jar. Athenian vase painters immortalized this moment with slapstick glee, the cowardly king's feet dangling from the pithos as Heracles looms overhead, boar in tow. Fifth labor, the Augean stables. King Augeas' immortal cattle hadn't had their barns cleaned in decades. The stench could have toppled Olympus. Instead of shoveling, Heracles rerouted 2 rivers to flush the filth in a day. But because he bargained for payment, 10% of the cattle, Eurystheus disqualified it on a technicality. Divine redemption, apparently, can't be freelance work. Number 6, the Stymphalian birds. These weren't your garden variety pigeons. Their bronze feathers doubled as arrows. Their screeches shattered eardrums. Athena gifted Heracles a pair of clattering castanets to startle them airborne. Then he picked them off with his bow. The scene later decorated temple friezes. Heracles mid-shot, metallic plumage raining down like shrapnel. By now, a pattern emerged. Each labor demanded more than muscle. They required adaptability. Fire against the Hydra. Hydrology for the stables. Sonic warfare for the birds. The Nemean lion's pelt became armor. The hind's capture showcased patience. Heracles was evolving from blunt instrument to tactical problem solver. Labor 7 returned to fauna. The Cretan bull, a Poseidon-cursed nightmare sent to King Minos, who'd reneged on sacrificing it. Heracles wrestled it onto a ship, delivered it to Tiryns, where Eurystheus, shockingly, released it. The bull eventually wandered to Marathon, prepping for its next mythic cameo in the Theseus saga. 8. The Mares of Diomedes. These Thracian stallions ate human flesh. Their owners were prisoners, usually. Heracles' solution was darkly poetic. He fed Diomedes to his own horses. Post-snack, the steeds became docile. Eurystheus, horrified, set them loose. Some versions say they galloped straight to Olympus, a dietary hazard the gods probably didn't need. 9 shifted gears, fetching the girdle of Hippolyta, Amazon queen. Initially peaceful, Hera sabotaged it by spreading rumors Heracles came to kidnap her. A battle erupted. Hippolyta died. The belt was taken. What could have been a trade became another tragedy of miscommunication. 10 upped the ante, stealing the cattle of Geryon, a 3-bodied giant in far-off Erythea. Heracles borrowed Helios' golden cup, a solar uber, to sail west, killed Geryon with hydrovenom arrows, then endured Hera sending gadflies to scatter the herd during the drive home. 11. The apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a dragon and nymphs, their location unknown. Heracles strong-armed directions from a sea god, then tricked Atlas into retrieving them while he held up the sky. When Atlas tried to ditch celestial babysitting duty, Heracles feigned needing a cloak adjustment, then handed back the heavens. Even Titans got outplayed. Finally, Labor 12, fetching Cerberus from Hades. No weapons allowed. Heracles descended, negotiated with Persephone, and dragged the 3-headed hellhound upstairs. Eurystheus fainted again. The dog was returned unharmed, and with that, 12 labors complete. But this wasn't just monster slaying. Each task purified a piece of Heracles' guilt. The Hydra taught teamwork. The hind, patience, the stable's ingenuity. By enduring these trials, he scrubbed away not just bloodstains, but pride, rage, and grief. Yet peace wouldn't follow. Fame did. With his 12 labors complete, Heracles should have faded into well-earned retirement, perhaps cultivating olives in some sunny grove, his greatest worry being an occasional bothersome satyr. But this was ancient Greece, where heroes never truly rested, not even in death. The labors had never been about granting peace. They were cosmic restitution, public spectacle, a divine probation period. Now cleansed of madness and guilt, Heracles found himself adrift. His name echoed across the Mediterranean, his legend growing with each retelling. Kings sought his strength, the desperate prayed to him, and tyrants learned to fear that lion-skinned silhouette on the horizon. He became something between a mercenary and a wandering demigod, part weapon, part myth made flesh. His post-labor adventures read like an ancient travelogue with monsters. In Libya, he defeated Antaeus, a giant who drew power from contact with the earth. Heracles solved this with brutal geometry, hoisting him skyward to crush him midair. In Egypt, King Busiris tried sacrificing him, a recurring theme with foreign rulers, only to become the ritual's victim himself. Even the Black Sea's winds carried whispers of his passing, where local tribes wove him into their own legends. The Greeks didn't keep him to themselves. In Egypt, he merged with Hereshaph, a ram-headed creator god. Phoenicians linked him to Melkart. The Etruscans adopted him as Hercule. By the time Rome rose, they'd rebranded him as Hercules. Less tragic wanderer, more disciplined conqueror. His lion pelt now accessorized empire building. Yet amid the glory, loneliness lingered. Enter Deianira, a Caledonian princess whose wit matched her beauty. Winning her hand required defeating her other suitor, the river god Achilles, who shapeshifted during their brawl from serpent to bull. When Heracles ripped off one horn, it became the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. Poetic, that an emblem of abundance was born from a god's defeat in a lover's quarrel. Their marriage brought fleeting peace, but myth abhors domestic bliss. Traveling near the Ivenus River, the centaur Nessus offered to ferry Deianira across while Heracles swam. Midstream, Nessus attempted abduction. Heracles' hydrovenom arrow found its mark, but with dying breath, the centaur tricked Deianira. His blood, he claimed, was a love charm. Years later, hearing rumors of Heracles' interest in Princess Iole, Deianira soaked a robe in Nessus-tainted blood. The moment it touched Heracles' skin, the venom ignited like liquid fire. In agony, he tore at the fabric, but it fused to his flesh. Betrayals burn worse than any hydra's bite. Here, at life's end, the strongest man was felled not by monsters, but by love's collateral damage. He built his own funeral pyre on Mount Ida. No one dared light it until passing shepherd Philoctetes agreed, receiving Heracles' bow as payment, the same weapon that would later decide Troy's fate. As flames consumed his mortal shell, his divine essence ascended. On Olympus, Hera, yes, that Hera, finally relented. In myth's ultimate irony, she welcomed her lifelong tormentee, offering her daughter Hebe, goddess of youth, as his bride. The queen of grudges had made peace. Thus Heracles transcended, not as a perfect god, but as something more compelling, a being who'd known suffering, error, and hard-won redemption. His cults spread, his altars multiplied, but his true legacy lived in the sweat of athletes, the whispered prayers of soldiers, the quiet resolve of ordinary people facing their own labors. Because Heracles wasn't just about strength. He was about getting back up. The flames of Mount Ida did not mark an ending, but a transformation. As smoke curled into the twilight, Heracles shed his mortal coil like a serpent shedding skin, revealing the divine core beneath. Yet, even as an Olympian, he remained restless, a god who couldn't shake the habits of a hero. His first act as an immortal? Freeing Prometheus. The Titan remained chained to Caucasus cliffs, his liver eternally devoured by Zeus' eagle. Heracles, passing by, do gods pass by places or simply will themselves there? drew his bow, and shot the bird mid-feast. No fanfare, no bargaining, just one clean arrow. When Zeus allowed the liberation, it hinted at something profound. Even thunderbolts bend to inevitability. Next, unfinished business in Troy. Years earlier, King Laomedon had cheated him of promised payment for rescuing Princess Hesione from a sea monster. Now divine, Heracles returned with an army, sacked the city, and installed Hesione's son Priam as king, unknowingly setting the stage for another war. Greek myths adore these nested destinies, where one hero's loose end becomes another's epic. Then came his most curious chapter, servitude to Queen Omphale of Lydia. Sold into slavery, gods can be slaves? For murdering a guest, a grave breach of Xenia. Heracles traded lion pelt for silk robes. Omphale wore his iconic skin while he spun wool at her loom, a gender-flipped tableau that fascinated ancient artists. Was this humiliation? Enlightenment? The Greeks loved ambiguities. His softer side emerged when rescuing Alcestis from death itself. King Admetus' self-sacrificing wife had taken his place in the underworld. Moved by such devotion, Heracles wrestled Thanatos at the grave. No labors, no glory, just raw compassion. Alcestis returned speechless, her silence echoing the cost of crossing divine laws. Through it all, his cult grew. At Thebes, athletes anointed his statues with oil before competitions. In Rome, merchants left coins at his roadside shrines, praying for safe journeys. Soldiers carved his name into their shields, not for invincibility, but for the courage to face the inevitable. Philosophers reclaimed him too. The Stoics saw in his labors a metaphor for mastering passions, the Nemean lion as anger, the Augean stables as life's accumulated filth. Seneca wrote that true strength lay not in lifting mountains, but in bearing small burdens daily without complaint. By the Christian era, his temples fell quiet, but his archetype persisted. The image of a suffering savior carrying others' sins, descending into hell. The parallels were too resonant to ignore. Even today, when a firefighter charges into smoke or a parent works double shifts, they walk in Heracles' footsteps. His final lesson? Immortality isn't about endless life. It's about becoming the voice that whispers, "Keep going," when the world says, "Stop." So sleep now. The pyre's embers are cold. The labors are done. The name Heracles no longer belonged solely to Greece. Like olive saplings carried by traders across the Mediterranean, his legend took root in foreign soils, adapting to new climates. This chapter tells how a Theban demigod became a global icon, reshaped, reimagined, but always recognizable. In Egypt, priests smoothed his rough edges. Their hairy shaft, a ram-headed creator god, absorbed Heracles' strength but added regal serenity. At Heracleopolis Magna, the rebranded city's very name a tribute, he became less brawler, more philosopher king. Meanwhile, Phoenician sailors spread tales of Melkart, his Tyrian counterpart who annually burned to death and resurrected, a twist the Greeks never gave him. Alexander the Great weaponized his image. Coins struck with Heracles' leonine visage marched eastward, from Persia to the Indus Valley. In Gandhar's Buddhist art, where Greek realism met Asian spirituality, stone carvers gave Bodhisattvas his muscular frame. Some scholars swear they've spotted him, lion pelt and all, guarding temple gates in Nepal. Rome polished him further. Their Hercules was less tragic hero, more civic mascot. Merchants prayed to him at the Forum Boreum's round temple. Emperors like Commodus staged arena combats in his honor, badly. Yet the people's Hercules endured, the god who drunk with peasants in tavern frescoes, his club resting against the wall like a forgotten umbrella. Christianity should have erased him. Instead, he shape-shifted again. Medieval bestiaries recast his labors as moral allegories. The Hydra became heresy's many heads, Cerberus, the mouth of hell. Renaissance artists draped his pagan muscles in Christian symbolism. Michelangelo's sketches show him bearing not the heavens, but Christ's cross. The Enlightenment stripped him of divinity, but kept his grit. Philosophers saw his labors as mankind's struggle against nature's chaos. A 1787 French political cartoon even dressed him in revolutionary garb, clubbing feudal monsters. Hollywood, inevitably, flattened him. Sword and sandal films of the 1950s turned him into a beefcake caricature, more concerned with flexing pecs than wrestling demons. Yet even there, traces remained. The loneliness in Steve Reeves' eyes, the weariness beneath Schwarzenegger's quips. Today, he survives in subtler forms. The exhausted nurse working a double shift channels his endurance. The single parent juggling jobs embodies his labors. Gym-goers lifting weights unknowingly perform devotions at his altar. Hercules' true power was never supernatural strength. It was his ability to mean whatever each age required. A god who carried not just the sky, but our collective hopes that burdens, eventually, can be put down. What makes Hercules endure when other myths fade? Not the club, nor the lion skin, but the raw humanity beneath the divine. He is the original antihero, flawed, furious, yet doggedly persistent. While Achilles embodies tragic pride and Odysseus' cunning wit, Heracles represents something more visceral, the will to continue when every fiber screams stop. The Stoics grasped this first. To them, his labors weren't about slaying monsters, but mastering the beasts within. The Hydra, nagging self-doubt that multiplies when attacked. The Augean stables, life's accumulated grime no single effort can cleanse. Seneca saw his apotheosis not as reward, but as inevitable. When a mortal acts with godlike resolve long enough, divinity becomes mere formality. Modern psychology recasts his madness episode differently. That moment when Heracles butchers his family reads less like divine punishment today, more like PTSD in a world without therapists. His labors become a veteran's struggle to atone for warzone actions never fully understood. Small wonder soldiers from Sparta to Saigon have whispered his name before battle. Even his fashion choices speak volumes. That lionskin cloak wasn't just armor. It was identity reforged from trauma. Like a burn survivor wearing grafts as badges, Heracles turned his greatest trial into literal second skin. Contemporary artists get this. Graphic novels depict his pelt fraying at the edges, bloodstains never fully faded. The feminist reclaiming surprises most. Once seen as the ultimate machismo symbol, modern readings highlight his vulnerability. Omphale's cross-dressing interlude isn't comedy, but transformation, a strong man learning softness. His tears when rescuing Alcestis reveal what the Nemean lion couldn't scar, his heart. Science fiction updates him constantly. The Hulk's rage echoes Heraclean madness. Rey's scavenger strength in Star Wars mirrors his humble origins. Even video game protagonists grinding through endless quests walk his path. Each fetch mission a miniature labor. Yet his deepest legacy thrives where you least expect. In addiction recovery groups, members nod when hearing how he wrestled the Hydra's regenerating heads. Single parents recognize the Sisyphus-like futility of cleaning stables only to face new messes. His myth endures not because we still believe in Zeus, but because we still believe in second chances. At his core, Heracles was always more process than person, not a being to worship, but a verb to enact. To Heracles, through life means to carry your particular burdens until they become wings. The final embers of Heracles' story glow not in grand temples, but in quiet, everyday moments. Walk through any hospital ward at dawn, and you'll see him in the intern on her 36th hour, blinking away exhaustion. Visit a construction site at noon. There he is in the migrant worker whose shoulders have carried one too many concrete sacks. These modern-day Heracles figures won't ascend to Olympus, but they share his most human trait, the quiet heroism of showing up. Archaeologists made a curious find in 2019, a child's wooden doll from 2nd century Rome, its limbs articulated to mimic Heracles' labors. Small hands could pose it wrestling imaginary lions or holding up the sky. This wasn't worship, it was childhood aspiration crystallized. Today's equivalent? The action figure clutched by a chemo patient during treatment, its plastic muscles whispering, "You too can endure." His paradox endures. The stronger the hero, the more relatable his suffering. When Renaissance artists painted him leaning on his club, they captured a truth deeper than mythology. Even demigods need respite. That famous Farnese statue shows him weary, almost middle-aged, the lion skin slipping like a tired shrug. No victory pose, just the weight of worlds momentarily set down. Modern therapy jargon would diagnose him with burnout. The labors left no space for self-care. His relationships crumbled under divine expectations. Yet therein lies his comfort. If even the son of Zeus struggled with work-life balance, maybe our own faltering attempts aren't so shameful. The LGBTQ+ community has reclaimed Omphale's interlude as early genderqueer coding. Drag performances now play with Hercules in heels, spinning wool with exaggerated camp. A far cry from Athenian vase painter Snickers. That time-traveling adaptability is his superpower. Every generation molds him to their needs. Climate activists reframe his labors as ecological parables. The Augean stables become industrial waste. The Hydra symbolizes pollution's multiplying heads. At Extinction Rebellion protests, someone always shows up in a papier-mâché lion skin. Ancient symbolism repurposed for modern crises. Perhaps his most unexpected afterlife is in Japanese manga. Series like Attack on Titan and Berserk feature Heracles-like protagonists, gifted with inhuman strength yet cursed by it. Their creators nod to the same truth Euripides grasped. Great power isolates as much as it elevates. But the real magic lies in how he bridges divides. At the 2023 Special Olympics, coaches noticed something peculiar. Athletes from Syria to South Korea all recognized the lion-skin icon. No translation needed for that universal language of struggle. Heracles survives because he fell so publicly, rose so visibly, and kept going so stubbornly. Not a god to kneel before, but a companion for when the road gets steep. His greatest labor wasn't cleaning stables or fetching apples. It was teaching us that heroes aren't born. They're built one weary step at a time. Beneath the layers of myth and interpretation, Heracles whispers an uncomfortable truth. True strength isn't about never breaking. It's about learning to live with the cracks. Modern neuroscience confirms what the ancients intuited. Trauma reshapes neural pathways just as Heracles' labors rewrote his destiny. That moment when he wakes from madness to see his murdered family? We now recognize it as the ultimate amygdala hijack, the primal brain overriding all reason. Contemporary military psychologists have coined the term the Hercules Complex for soldiers who, like the hero, take on impossible missions to atone for past actions beyond their control. At veteran retreats, group therapy circles often feature lion pelt motifs, not as symbols of aggression, but as reminders that what once wounded can also protect. The business world ironically perverts his legacy. Corporate Hercules programs push employees to unsustainable productivity, glorifying burnout as some modern labor. But the myth's real lesson appears in smaller moments. The nurse who washes her hands for the 30th time that shift, the teacher grading papers past midnight. These are the true heirs to his endurance. His fashion legacy thrives unexpectedly. From Alexander McQueen's 2003 lionskin dresses to streetwear brands' Hydraprint hoodies, designers plunder his iconography. Yet the most poignant tribute came from a 2022 art installation. Hundreds of worn-out work gloves arranged in the shape of his club, each stain telling stories of invisible labors. Even parenting manuals invoke him now. The 12 Labors of Toddlerhood blogs humorously compare cleaning peanut butter smears to the Augean stables. Deeper parallels emerge in foster parent forums, where caregivers describe loving damaged children as holding up the sky for someone else's stars. Climate scientists explicitly reference his tasks. The Stymphalian bird's metallic feathers find echoes in microplastic pollution. The Cretan bull's fiery breath mirrors wildfire outbreaks. At COP summits, activists distribute apples with Hesperides or extinction stickers, mythology repurposed as warning. His darkest hour, the poisoned robe, resonates in the #MeToo era. Scholars now read Diana not as a jealous wife, but as another of Hera's victims, her love weaponized against the hero. Contemporary adaptations give her voice. Margaret Atwood's poem Hercules and Diana retells the tragedy from her perspective, the fabric becoming a second skin neither could remove. Perhaps his most radical reinterpretation comes from disability advocates. The autistic community has adopted his sensory overload during madness episodes as early neurodivergent representation. Wheelchair rugby teams name themselves the Hydras, regeneration as triumph, not threat. Yet for all the modern reframing, something primal remains. When Ukrainian soldiers painted his likeness on their tanks in 2022, they weren't invoking the nuanced Hercules of academia. They needed the raw, uncomplicated hero who fights monsters because someone must. This duality is his gift. He contains both our highest aspirations and our deepest flaws. The child pretending to strangle toy snakes and the hospice worker holding a dying hand both recognize something of themselves in him. As our journey through Heracles' myth draws to a close, we find him not atop Olympus, but everywhere at once, a shape-shifting presence in the quiet battles of ordinary lives. The barista grinding through another double shift wears his lion skin as surely as any marble statue. The refugee carrying children across borders performs labors Eurystheus couldn't have imagined. Heracles has become less a character than a mirror, reflecting back whatever strength we need to see. Modern astronomy offers an unexpected epilogue. In 2023, the James Webb Telescope captured NGC 6357, a star-forming nebula nicknamed the Celestial Lionskin for its swirling golden gases. Scientists noted its molecular structure mirrors the Nemean pelt's fractal patterns. The universe, it seems, still wears his cloak. Language preserves him too. When we call crises Herculean, we don't mean divine. We mean human-scale impossible. The term has shed its mythological roots to describe nursing shortages, climate deadlines, even assembling IKEA furniture. His name became shorthand for the universal truth. Everyone carries invisible stables to clean. Therapy offices see his legacy daily. Patients recovering from trauma often sketch lionskins in art therapy, not as symbols of power, but as boundaries between past pain and present self. One veteran's viral Twitter thread described his service dog as a Nemean rescue mutt, transforming the hero's armor into emotional support. Even Silicon Valley couldn't resist him. A 2024 AI named Hercules, hybrid emotional reasoning adaptive cognitive learning entity system, assists disaster responders. Its logo a stylized club wrapped in circuit boards. The engineers missed the irony. The system's first breakdown occurred when it prioritized saving kittens over efficiency metrics, proving even algorithms catch his compassion. Children understand him best. At a London children's hospital, murals show a wheelchair-using Hercules completing adapted labors, the Hydra's heads as 4 lines, Cerberus as 3 playful therapy dogs. Young patients add band-aids to his illustrated arms, a small act of kinship with a hero who also hurt. His final lesson emerges in global mourning rituals. From Mexican Day of the Dead altars featuring lionskin skeletons to Tibetan sand mandalas depicting his pyre as liberation, cultures have claimed his story as their own metaphor for resilience. The shared understanding, ashes fertilize rebirth. Perhaps this is why he endures, not as a perfect ideal, but as proof that brokenness precedes growth. The cracks in his story let our own light through. When we whisper, "I can't go on," and do so anyway, we become his living continuation. So let the stars keep their constellations. Heracles walks among us now. In the teacher grading papers at midnight, the nurse washing hands raw, the parent rocking a feverish child. His labors weren't 12 tasks, but one endless lesson. Strength isn't measured by what you carry, but by how gently you put it down.